strategies. We're now going to discuss some of the ways that people have come up with to combat the meth issue in their communities, particularly the rural areas. Would each of you like to introduce yourself and let us know where you work and the job that you do? Jack?
My name is Jack Ballard. I'm assigned as the Rural State Meth Coordinator for the state of Oklahoma, hired by Strategic Applications International. And prior to that, I was a police officer with Oklahoma City for 25 years.
Thank you.
I'm Jim Schmit. I'm the director of Clay Crossing Foundation in Mott, Oklahoma. We're an extended care facility for males 18 and over dealing with addictions.
My name is Cheryl Kraft. I'm with the Department of Human Services, and I'm a child welfare supervisor in Atoka, Oklahoma.
I'm Wes Lane. I'm president of the Burbridge Foundation and was a career prosecutor and district attorney in Oklahoma City.
Well, wonderful. We heard in our last panel that there is hope. There are strategies that we can help implement and that we can contribute to because there is hope for folks that are on methamphetamine. So how does the treatment picture look in Oklahoma? Do we have an adequate number of treatment facilities, particularly in the rural areas? How is that coming about?
Well, I'd like to say that outside the metro areas, we don't have a lot of good facilities, long-term facilities. So our folks have to leave the county to go someplace else, leaving their support system behind. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. But we do need more outpatient and rural-centered places that folks can go to.
Okay, so some of the challenges there may be location and cost. Okay. Jim, what's your experiences with access to treatment?
Well, there is a very low number of beds available in the state of Oklahoma for chemical dependency treatment. When we got together in 2000 and started Clay Crossing, there was no really long-term treatment available. I'd worked for 14 years in a 30-day treatment program, and the methamphetamine addicts we were seeing in the revolving door. So we got together and established a minimum of 90 days, and we have people stay all the way up to a year in our facility. We established it in a rural area and established it for men only so that there were no outside disturbances. They're on 400 acres. They don't have anywhere to go. If they climb the tallest hill at our facility, they can see nowhere. So that gives us the opportunity to deal with the problems that they come in with. Most of them feel they come in with alcohol, opiates, marijuana, methamphetamine. Well, that's not their problem. Their problem is living problems. They have living problems. The alcohol and drugs are only symptoms of those living problems. So we have to address those living problems, or they go right back out and they get into the usage of their chemicals. And there is a real shortage of treatment facilities in the state at this time.
Okay. Mr. Lane, did you want to comment about the availability of treatment?
I don't think I can say it any better than they have. I think that, it's clear that that's a huge problem. I think it's been a huge problem for a long time, and the absence of that really just undermines the overall effort. You get these, especially when we saw in the aftermath of the initial Crystal Darkness campaign, you had just a large numbers of people wanting treatment. The problem was where.
So there's that systemic effect of we bring people education and awareness, and then they go to seek treatment, and that's not always available. So what are some strategies that we can use to deal with that? Jack, do you have ideas about community strategies?
Yes, I do. Community strategies, a lot of them have already started, with the coalition building, I call it, just a pooling of sources. Number one, to keep things going from Crystal Darkness, and not let those efforts go to waste. I've got quite an education just here today And I can tell you, there's not enough places to treat this. And, the amount of people who use this drug and want help and are out in those rural areas, and how likely they are to use it. It's the communities are what they rely on. Like Chris said earlier, the getting back out after that, the community's got to help him. So with that, I would say community coalitions, they have to be the ones driving this to help.
Okay, other strategies that any of you have worked in?
We've used our multidisciplinary team to try to build up some resources because we don't have a lot of resources in town or close by. So we've tried to use the people that we already have on our team to try to build some support systems. We've got NA and AA started. The churches have offered facilities where we can have meetings. We've used facilities like that to try to, in the interim before we can get people to rehab. We have moms that want to go in, but there's a wait, maybe weeks, maybe even up to a month before they can even get into a facility. So in the meantime, we've got to come up with a solution on what do we do until she gets into rehab. What do we do with the kids? Where do we put the kids? So we try to use that as a multidisciplinary approach to try to figure out what's the best way to get mom what she needs and not traumatize the kids any further than they're already been traumatized. So that's when we use family. A lot of times there'll be parts of the family that are very aware of what's going on with mom or dad, and they don't approve of it, but they're powerless to really do any kind of meaningful intervention with them. But once we step in or once law enforcement steps in, then they feel like they have a system where they can come in and say, yeah, I will take care of the kids while this is going on, and we can get mom into rehab and do things like that. So we're using a lot of family connections to try to do that as well.
Wonderful, and a nice role for the community to be able to step in and sort of help bridge that time period before getting into treatment. Jim, what makes meth treatment unique compared to other substances? There's been some talk about that today, that the treatment programs are a bit different.
Well, when a meth addict comes into treatment, first we have to differentiate whether they're a meth addict or a schizophrenic, because the two behaviors mimic each other so much. And so it takes the methamphetamine addict a lot longer to get through the detox period and everything, and they're highly susceptible to leaving treatment early on because the cravings come back. After 4 to 6 weeks, if the symptoms have not decreased, then we set up a psychiatric eval, and they may need some psychiatric direction and some medications. We do our best to keep medications at a minimum because chemically dependent people do not know how to read a prescription bottle. They become dyslexic. If it says 1 every 4 to 6 hours, they read it 4 to 6 every 1 hour. So we really do our best to keep the medications to a minimum unless they absolutely need it. And then when they do need something for anxiety or the paranoia, we attempt to stay away from the benzodiazepines and go with some of the other anti-anxieties such as Buspar or something that will not be addictive. They're also extremely paranoid. It takes a while to build a therapeutic relationship with them. We have to get the family involved from the start because they have a tendency to fabricate a lot of situations. The denial's extremely great. They do not know how far down they have gone. They believe everything is just fine. All they have to do is dry out, go home, and resume life. And the drug just catches them. And when we look at, say, alcohol, there's about 17 and a half years, studies show, before alcohol becomes a significant problem and there's that first intervention. With methamphetamine, that's shortened up considerably due to the addictive nature of the drug. So you have to look at that. most of the meth addicts we get in, their main motivation is the legal system. They come in and they say, well, I caught a case. And so we ask them how they catch a case. Is it like a baseball or football or whatever? And then we go from there and get them out of that mentality of the drug world and start looking at reality. Their perception becomes their reality. And if we can put them around positive people, then they can start grounding into the reality. And so that's one of the major differences amongst methamphetamine addicts versus alcoholics or opiate addicts or even marijuana addicts.
Well, some of the research demonstrates that meth abuse doesn't really occur until adulthood, young adulthood, about 21 or later. And how does that impact our ability to reach out to folks? Do you find this to be true in your work?
Well, we do have a lot of young women, and I speak to women more than I do the men because we get more moms through the system than we do dads a lot of times. But we do have some very young women that say they started probably around 16, seems to be a very popular age, for their first experience with drugs of any kind, and meth in particular. And it's not uncommon for us to have women come to a system with 5-6 years of meth use behind them before it really gets so bad that they've kind of bottomed out. It's affected their kids, it's affected their lives, it's affected everything. They've caught a case, as Jim so eloquently put it. They've come to the realization they've got to do something, either to get out of court, to get their kids back, to do something. They've got to come to some realization. Most of our moms are very young moms, under 30, and that seems to be where we catch the majority of our moms and kids. I think education starts in high school about some drugs, maybe not so much about methamphetamine's long-term lasting effects, that even after you get off of it, there's still things that you've got to deal with. But women and children in our experience, or in our level of experience, are the ones that are the youngest victims, the young moms, the young kids.
If I can just jump in, I'm just curious. Do they say generally why it is? You say 16 is a popular age. What is it about that?
Well, and this is just anecdotal, but they usually have a boyfriend that has it and gives it to them. That's how they get involved with it the first time, is through a relationship of some sort. Oklahoma incarcerates women at a higher rate than just about any other state. And I think last year there were roughly 1,300 women that went into DOC. 63% of those needed moderate to high assistance with drugs. And so when moms go into prison, it affects everybody. It affects the kids. It affects how they view the world. Visiting mom in jail is not exactly how you would want your child to grow up, but that's the reality for a lot of kids. But women get hooked on it usually through relationships, either from family relationships or boyfriends.
I see it starting earlier due to pressures, and they usually start out getting Ritalin, Adderall, Concerta at school, and they have to add a few more hours because of all these expectations. Got to keep the grades up, got to perform well on the athletic teams, and then the financial part comes into it, and it's way easier to buy meth than it is to look around and buy the prescription drugs, and it's an economic factor. The stuff off the street is cheaper than what their classmates are selling them through the pharmaceuticals. And so it builds. And when I worked at another treatment center, the females would get hooked on it because of the weight loss implications. They did not want to get fat, so they would use that to take off a few pounds, then boom, they had the few pounds taken off, and they were looking anorexic, yet the disease, the addiction, had been activated, and they could no longer say yes or no to it.
So what can we do to spread the word? What is your opinion on our media campaigns, public service announcements, and some of the publications that we see out and the programs on television and on the internet? Jack, do you think those work?
Definitely. I think any form of education on methamphetamine works. I got to say, what worked for me, I wasn't going to use meth, but I'm just saying what worked for me that actually just took me back a step was when you saw the before and after mug shots, have you, of people who were probably first time, at least offenders in the judicial system, to when they got caught 1, 2, 3 years later, everything that people's talked about, from the dental problems to, all those things. If nothing else, once a TV advertise one myth about methamphetamine a day, the 100 myths, and start with that. Start with one. Have somebody just put out a myth that's not true about it, or that is. Every which way you want to, but yes, education, media, it helps.
Okay, Mr. Lane?
Yeah, I think something that doesn't get said very much, and I ran a juvenile division for 6 years, and I remember that, the young gangbanger that would be getting involved, the kid who would stick the muzzle of the 9mm into the little old lady's ear because he wanted her car, he has a belief system, and that belief system prods him, pushes him along. This is the way he views the world. He's no different of having a belief system than whether you're Pastor Bob at the local church. He's got a belief system too that also impacts his values, his behaviors, and all that. I think a lot of times in this conversation that we have about education, which is very important. I mean, the public awareness deal. I wouldn't have got involved with the Crystal Darkness campaign if we didn't think public awareness wasn't at least a good launch pad. But I think what we've got to be really careful about is having this value-free worldview deal that, as if it doesn't matter what belief systems that we are injecting into these kids. The belief systems that we're seeing stirred up today, these belief systems that would say things like, my self-esteem is based upon what I look like, do I perceive myself as fat, or my belief system is something that I kind of adhere to more, might makes right, as opposed to a servant attitude. I mean, all of these things are very important, and I think that the people that are listening right now need to really question, what is the belief system, what is the worldview that they are passing along to their children? It matters. It matters. Having been a career prosecutor, you cannot help but notice that the worldviews of people in the decisions they make of, am I going to get involved with this drug, or am I going to hang out with these kind of people, are a direct result of the worldviews they possess. And I think that a lot of times that we try to avoid faith-based issues a great deal because we try to be very politically correct, when in fact we're actually consigning our kids to stuff like this. So I think we need to keep that in mind, that belief systems matter.
Well, and I think in a rural community too, the overlap is so substantial. Folks who are in the same faith-based network are the same folks that are in a sports network or in a school network, and we have so much overlap that it's okay to have those discussions about engaging our faith-based our community. And the point of it, what really matters is, again, everyone in a community has a role. Whether you have children or not, you can choose or not to choose to be involved in your community. And that's what we're really asking today, is for people to look at ways that you can get involved with your rural law enforcement community that's really trying to make a difference with this methamphetamine issue. So, Jack, why don't you tell us a little bit about the rural law enforcement initiative, and then we'll have Wes talk about Crystal Darkness, and you can sort of talk about your connection to that as well.
Okay, well, rural law enforcement initiative, it's just that, and it doesn't just have to do with, law enforcement alone, but it has to do with the community also, as a whole, not just rural law enforcement like it says, but tribal police. The act was signed into, I want to say that it was signed into an act by President Obama in February. Last February, I believe. And anyway, I'd like to say that Rural Law Enforcement Meth Initiative is there to assist rural law enforcement and assist the community and bring the two together in a multidisciplinary coalitions in the high-risk counties and every county that needs help. That is my job to assist in that, and we all know it's needed, and pretty much, I guess that's it in a nutshell.
All right, and sometimes, folks have a little trouble getting law enforcement to the table when they're starting a community project.
Well, I didn't want to go over into the crystal darkness area. So anyway, I'll drop it there and let Wes pick up.
All right. Well, and you heard Chris say today that when he used to not see a lot of law enforcement officers around, and now it seems like they really do care, and they care about, they get that just going to jail isn't the answer. And I think that was sort of resonated through some other conversations, that law enforcement realizes that this is a community issue, it's a holistic approach. And so would like to hear about Crystal Darkness and how that's taken place here in Oklahoma.
I'll touch on what you said, though, right before that. It really is interesting. I found myself reflecting, just as you were saying that. I was a drug prosecutor back in the late 80s, early 90s, and our attitude then about treatment, what? What are you talking about? I mean, to have thought that there would be something like drug courts was, as you know, I mean, it was just unthinkable. And so versus today. So I think just the whole education process for the law enforcement side, whether as prosecutors or as police officers, has really gone a long way to improving the overall scene. And also from the law enforcement side, not seeing that is not being tough on crime, the old tough on crime, which is important. You want do bad things happen. You have to have some level of continuity there. But at the same time, there are some methods. One of the methods being the crystal darkness endeavor, and the whole purpose of that. I mean, we didn't start that here. That was actually started by a group of kind of like in Oklahoma. There's a group called Crime Stoppers. There was a similar group called Secret Witness in Reno, Nevada. That group, a few years ago, were trying to figure out how can we influence methamphetamine problems in our community, and one thing led to another, and they realized, well, let's do a documentary in which it's really speaking to the methamphetamine problem in our community, and let's see if we can get the TV stations to air it. Well, one thing led to another, and they were able to get almost all of the TV stations to air it at the same time, prime time, and the governor and First Lady of Nevada got on board, all that. And then the next thing you know, you see the state of Washington, and then you see Las Vegas, or doing a city, and from Reno, then later Las Vegas, and then you start seeing other efforts. So I got a phone call in October of 2007 talking about this as a launch pad, and in fact, what it was to us in Oklahoma when it finally came to us, and the First Lady was gigantically on board on this, as well as Daryl Weaver with the Bureau of Narcotics and Terry White with the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. That group right there were just instrumental here. But the idea was not just that it would be a flash in the pan and let's have a TV night, and in fact we did have virtually every television station in the state aired at the same time. It was a remarkable deal. Almost 2 million people watched it. But the point was to be to a point where we are today, in which we recognize that there is no one single bullet, silver bullet response, that it really requires comprehensive solutions. These are complex problems, and it takes all of the community, and that's what we've been hearing today. I think we all understand that better. But I think that there is hope, and it does take everybody from the law enforcement to the schools to the different agencies, citizens that are involved. We heard a mayor talk about their community involvement and the like, and so there is great hope. The purpose of Crystal Darkness was to hopefully see what is actually happening today, and so people should. There is success. There is victory.
All right, well, it's wonderful to have programs like Crystal Darkness in a community. And Jack, have you been able to partner with that effort and through your rural law enforcement methamphetamine initiative as well?
Yes, we are currently involved with Crystal Darkness, and I have a list of those people that I'm going to get out to and see here shortly. I have also been working with Adrian Rollins to identify the top 4 at-risk counties that I'll be coming out to see, and I look forward to seeing my law enforcement brothers, the sheriffs of those counties too, and having a chance to talk to them and just let them know how important this is, and that the community wants them there, and that it's a priority to all of us. And law enforcement, like people have been saying, law enforcement has come a long way. They are educated. They do care. They know that just arresting people and putting them in jail, it doesn't work on these kinds of things. They have to have the support afterwards, and that starts from the sheriff to the whole community. So.
All right, and if you can take an event like Crystal Darkness and take that momentum and take that energy and wrap that into a successful, comprehensive community strategy, that's really the goal. Thank you.